We now have the pleasure of being joined by Jacob Lane. He is the founder and podcast director of the state of Louisville, host from the Pink Seats, and also covers Louisville basketball as well. Jacob, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. Always down to talk Louisville football. And, Syracuse holds a special place in my heart, considering the fact not too long ago, we saw our quarterback literally jump over another player, which I'm sure we'll get into. But great to be on. Great to talk football, man.
Well, let's just get into that because it was going to come up, but let's do it now. It's Lamar Jackson's jersey retirement. I believe it's only him and Unitas now that will have their jerseys honored.
That is correct. And we talked about this on our podcast from the Pink Seats, that this is actually just the second player in my lifetime that I've actually seen play sports at the University of Louisville who will have their number retired.
Who was the other one?
Angel McCoughtry, women's basketball player in the early 2000s, led Louisville to their first national championship appearance. I think it was like 2005. But she's a legend, man. Absolute legend here.
So back to Lamar, this might anger Syracuse fans. I think I might know what the answer is, but what's the defining Lamar Jackson at Louisville moment for you?
Yeah, so you would think it's the hurdle over the Syracuse defensive back going into the end zone there, and that early season matchup back in 2016, but actually it's the Florida State game, which fell just a few weeks after that, where Louisville, took part in game day for the first time, college football, ESPN game day, and welcomed a number 2 team into Cardinal Stadium, and actually just took them to the woodshed, man. Gave them their biggest loss in program history, 62-10. Lamar Jackson had 6 touchdowns that day. I mean, it was just beautiful what he did. And for Louisville fans, they had never seen anything like that before. And so the leap kind of was the primer to Lamar Jackson stepping into the national spotlight. But that Florida State game is by far his defining moment at Louisville.
Now you've got, a Lamar Jackson light, perhaps, at quarterback for the Cardinals with Malik Cunningham, 15 rushing touchdowns already this year, which leads the nation. How do those two compare?
It's crazy. If you had mentioned Malik Cunningham in the same breath as Lamar Jackson the last several years, people would scoff at you. Like, how dare you compare Malik to Lamar? Just because not that Malik Cunningham is not a special talent, because it's very obvious. We knew very early on in his career that the talent was there, but it's more of just Lamar is rare air, right? You don't ever have a player come into a program like Louisville, put up the number that they do. I mean, Lamar Jackson is the greatest player in Louisville football history. It's not even close. And then compare him to a quarterback just because he's, capable thrower and runner. But what Malik has done this year, and really more of how he's done it, the highlight plays, the being able to spin out of tackles, just get into space where you don't think he's going to be able to get into. And this season, as they've played on multiple networks, you've heard several announcers start to say, wow, this kid looks like number 8. And at first, Louisville fans were like, yeah, no. But now I think most fans are like, this kid is, a near clone from a talent perspective and the ability to be able to do these things on the field. He's never going to get to the magnitude of Lamar Jackson, but he's special, man. And it's just been so much fun to watch.
Obviously, Lamar has a lot of things that he does better than everyone, including Malik Cunningham. Is there anything Malik can do that maybe Lamar couldn't, or anything that he's better at?
No. I think that's a simple answer. No.
So this team obviously, hasn't won exactly like the Lamar Jackson teams have. How much of that is Malik and how much of that is the weapons around him?
I don't think it's much of either. It's really hard to compare the two situations that Malik is playing in versus what Lamar played in under Bobby Petrino. This is a much more balanced effort across the board from Louisville football. I know Malik has got, gaudy numbers, but they have weapons at wide receiver. They have weapons at tight end. The offensive line is kind of coming along, but they have been rebuilding, and they won 8 games in 2019, but Scott Satterfield took over a program that was just absolutely just roster depleted. Bobby Petrino was just like playing Madden with roster of 15, 16 wide receivers, 5 or 6 offensive linemen. Like, it was just so unbalanced that Scott Satterfield and his staff had to come in and completely change the way they recruited, the way that they did things. And it's taken Malik some time to be able to get, to the point of being a really, really dominant quarterback in the ACC. But Lamar, when Louisville was doing what they were doing, still had the benefit of some of Charlie Strong's players, and some of those players who had been late in Charlie Strong's tenure and very early in Bobby Petrino's second tenure at Louisville, who kind of set the tone and the culture. They had a lot of players within the time that Lamar was here playing the NFL. That's not the case anymore. So Malik has been in much more of a rebuild, where Lamar took over in a situation where the talent was there, and they had the potential to do things really special, obviously climbing all the way to number 5 or 6 in the college football playoff rankings back in 2016.
With the team being in a rebuild, how important have some of those carryover players been for Satterfield? Like, it's CJ Avery, who stayed for a super senior season. What's been the impact of, the extra eligibility and older guys on this team?
Man, if you take away the guys that Bobby Petrino, left on the roster, and you just had Scott Satterfield start from blank, it would be a much different story. The guys like CJ Avery that you mentioned, Jack Fagot, Marshawn Ford, Yasir Abdullah, Chandler Jones, there's a number of guys, Tiberius Peterson, who were on this roster when Scott Satterfield took over. And now they weren't what they are now, but they were, guys like CJ Avery were still leading the team in tackles. Yasir Abdullah was still a dynamic weapon, as a pass rusher. They've just been able to kind of groom them and develop them. And without them, this is a completely different rebuild. You don't win 8 games in 2019. And honestly, I know the record was 4-7 in 2020 during the COVID year, but Louisville was much better than that. Probably should have finished with at least a 500 record or better. Obviously, there's things that went into that. And those guys played a huge role in that. And then this season, bringing back CJ Avery, Cole Bentley, Caleb Chandler for that, super senior year has been crucial in them being in just about every single game, which we're going to get into this. This is something that we can kind of bond over here is late game losses. But those veterans, without them, this team is 2-3 wins type of team for the last couple of years.
So those late game losses, they've been talked about a lot. After the Clemson loss, 3 of the 5 defeats for Louisville. The Cards have led in the fourth quarter. In those 3 defeats, the go-ahead points were at least scored in the final 3 minutes, 2 of them in the final 30 seconds. Syracuse, of course, has felt, similar ire at points this season. What's happened in the fourth quarter? They keep saying, a lack of execution, but why? Why has this team not put it together late?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the lack of execution is the thing that has been talked about the most. I think Louisville fans are really frustrated with the coaching staff and the things that they've said post-game, specifically Scott Satterfield being kind of pinpointing one item in the game, or, talking about something that didn't go their way that really impacted the outcome. For instance, the officiating in the Wake Forest game earlier this season, where late in the first half, Wake Forest gets an extra play, doesn't deserve. Louisville wins that game if that doesn't happen. So Scott Satterfield, of course, talks about that. In the Virginia game, they talk about what they did up until the point of kind of blowing things, and so on and so forth. You kind of get it. So there's really this tension, and it continues to happen. And what it is a combination of injuries. They've lost some key players late in games. Clemson, obviously Malik Cunningham had to exit the game because of an injury that he suffered. Catrell Clark against NC State tore his ACL, had to leave that game earlier in the season. They lost Monty Montgomery. So they've had a lot of injuries that have taken away key players who in those moments could have been able to make a play. But they've blown blocks. They've gotten penalties. They should never be in a lot of these situations that they're in, but it's the little things that they're doing late that are just mental lapses that have really kept them from winning. And I talked about this on our show this week, that there's this kind of phrase in the NBA, and they use it a lot in professional sports more so than college, when talking about rebuilding teams, having to learn what it feels like to win and see what that's like and how hard that is. And despite this team having a ton of seniors and a ton of guys who have done it, they have 80 freshmen, and I put freshmen in quotations because of the, kind of extra eligibility red shirts, but they've got a lot of young players who are playing key roles. For instance, a guy like Dorian Jones, an inside linebacker, he has never seen the field prior to Monty Montgomery going down, but he's developed the ability to be out there. He's played really well, but in these late game situations, guys like him, Greedy Vance, they're just not making the plays that they need to win the game. And it's just happening week after week after week. And there's ire with the play calling. Maybe the play calling could change. Maybe against Clemson, you don't go 3 straight outside zone runs on the goal line. Maybe that puts you in a different spot. But the coaching staff has pointed to execution because there's still guys who are just not doing what they need to do.
What's the feeling on the coaching staff in general? I mean, Satterfield is rebuilding, but also this program's, even through rebuilds, had a lot of success recently. They're in danger with certain circumstances playing against them to miss bowl games 2 years in a row for the first time in over a decade.
Yeah, there's a lot of fans who, if they had their choice, Scott Satterfield would have been gone weeks ago. In fact, there would have been a lot of fans who asked that Scott Satterfield left after the offseason with the whole debacle of interviewing at South Carolina and denying it. But, quite frankly, the coaching staff has earned the right to continue to do their jobs, in my opinion. I think firing Scott Satterfield would be a shame for Louisville football, considering that if 2019 doesn't happen, they don't win 8 games in his first season, and you go off of 2 wins to maybe 5 or 6, I don't think the expectations jump to where they are now. But if you take everything into consideration, you take in the COVID year, the injuries that they've had, some of the things that have gone wrong can be pointed to him, the lack of recruiting at quarterback, some of the issues they've had with defensive line, the secondary, big plays being given up. But they inherited a mess, man. And they have gotten to the point in year 3 where they are competing late in games against really good football teams. And that's gives them the right to continue. Now, there's got to be changes this offseason. Likely Scott Satterfield will be hiring an offensive coordinator. I know a lot of fans probably don't know this, but Scott Satterfield is the play caller and always has been. And as the head coach, he is a former quarterback at App State. So he's a guy who is really smart, has a scheme that you'll hear coaches say he does better than anybody. But there are circumstances where Scott Satterfield can't get out of his own way and sticks to what he knows. And so there's going to be some turnover there, probably some turnover on the defensive side of the football where they just, quite frankly, have not been good enough this season to win a lot of games. But, as far as the staff goes, I think that they're headed in the right direction, but there's some changes that have to be made. And that's what the fans are trying to get behind now, is supporting them to be able to continue to grow, but also demanding accountability.
One of the staples of Satterfield, at least before he got to Louisville, was the spread offense, going really pro style before all of college football was doing it. Obviously, Louisville has relied a ton on running quarterbacks recently, be it Cunningham pass, Lamar Jackson, of course. Yeah. What's that kind of clash been like between Satterfield's spread and then maybe what a lot of people would think would be in place, more of a traditional read option look for a running quarterback?
Yeah, look, Scott Satterfield had a very traditional quarterback at App State. I mean, if you look back at guys like Taylor Lamb, Zach Thomas, they could run, they could move, but they were pocket passers who, mostly did their work off of play action and were dangerous with their arm. Now, Malik Cunningham has been a gift that Scott Satterfield, I don't think he knew what he was inheriting, right? That's like you come down on Christmas Day and, you get something and you open it and years later it's worth $1 million. You just didn't know what you got at the time and now it's worth everything in the world. So Sat has really done a good job of adjusting to Malik's skills of being able to run. He's obviously their leading rusher this year, has 15 touchdowns. I think he's still second or third in the country in rushing touchdowns. They have used the ability that he presents with the run. They've incorporated a lot of triple option. You'll see guys come through the backfield from out wide as a wide receiver and take handoffs. You'll just see a variety of different things. And he's always been really nifty of being able to take that outside inside zone and then play action and option. But the weapons at his disposal are just so much better than what he had at App State. And so he's really evolved that. And I think that the next evolution of this offense is finding a quarterback who's just a little bit more accurate, who can throw some of those short the far sideline, hash marker throws. Malik's arm strength is good, but it's more of a downfield type of throw. He's not great when he's forcing or throwing balls out to the sideline. And he's just always kind of been a one read guy. He's improved, but still struggles with that. So the next phase is getting a quarterback in who can, really kind of spread the field and hurt you with his arm just as much as his legs. And Malik's plays, if you'll see his stats are coming through the air, big plays, 75 yarders, 78, 90 yard plays. So that's where the improvement needs to be on his end, is those short throws and being able to complete passes with pressure and things like that in passing situations.
that evolution of scheme sounds a lot like Syracuse, where they switched from Tommy DeVito to Garrett Schrader, and Sterling Gilbert, the offensive coordinator, who was brought in to run the offense that, Dino and Sterling ran with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now they switched to a read option, and whether you go one way or the other, both of these teams have landed on top rushing attacks, not just in the conference, but really in the country, both averaging over 200 a game. Is this, going to be a game, you think, where both teams load up the box? Because it feels kind of obvious.
Yeah.
They're both trying to do the same thing.
Yeah. I think, yeah, for the most part, it will be. I think it'll really just be two coaches saying, I know what I do, I know what you do, but we're just going to go do it better. But as I look at Syracuse stats, and maybe you can kind of dispel, maybe the stats tell a different story. We talked about this on the show this week, that Louisville's secondary, if you're Dino and the offensive coordinator at Syracuse, despite not being a throwing offense, you have to know that there's chances there for big plays. And as I look down the roster, some of the statistics I see, 75-yard play, 74-yard play, your receivers have made big plays. And so I expect Dino to really, try to push the boundaries of what Garrett Schrader can do as a passer. I know he's only a 51% passer. He's not really a guy who's known for doing that, 13 rushing touchdowns compared to 7 passing touchdowns. But when you have the struggles that Louisville has had, where Contrell Clark goes down and you're relying on Chandler Jones, who's really more of a second or third corner as your primary corner, and then Greedy Vance, who's a young guy. Trey Franklin is a guy that they signed literally like a week before camp this year. He's been a revelation with 2 picks, but you're really forcing these guys to have to be disciplined. And I would expect that Dino will see that on the film and see where there is opportunities to test that. And the same goes for Louisville. Obviously, Syracuse is one of the best defenses in the country. I mean, there's no denying it, not all the way across the board, but in some areas. And I think that despite what Louisville does running the football, I think that they will try to get more of the passing game involved. I would expect Malik Cunningham, if healthy, to try to spread the sugar a little bit and pull out the magic of Lamar Jackson and trying to be able to incorporate the pass with the run. Now, whether they're successful with that, we'll see. Louisville last week, what really hurt them was that they missed on a couple of big shots. And the same has been the last few weeks with them against Virginia and NC State. They complete those. I think Louisville wins this game by 10 plus because they have outgained just about everybody this season. They've been able to shut down the run, holding Clemson and NC State well below averages. But it's all about, can they hit on those big plays and also in the short passing game? And that will be the difference, in my opinion.
All right, Jacob, before I let you go, I will be traveling down to Louisville for the game, as I told you before we hopped on.
Fantastic.
When I'm in Louisville, where do I need to go eat? I think I'm going to ask like fried chicken specific, but if there's something off the board that's really good and better than getting fried chicken.
Yeah, fried chicken specific.
Then okay. You can throw that in too.
Okay. Now let me ask you this. Are you getting fried chicken because you've heard KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken? Is that the reason why you're going fried chicken, or is that just your shebang? Like that's what you go for everywhere?
It's not what I go for everywhere. It's more that I've just heard, Kentucky is the spot for fried chicken.
Okay, there are great fried chicken spots. Don't get me wrong. There's a place down in Nulu, which is right outside of downtown, about 10 minutes from the stadium. There's a place called Royals Hot Chicken. If you're in the St. Matthews, Bardstown area, you have Joella's. These are Nashville hot chicken places. They're great. Don't get me wrong. They're great. But if you're going to be in the Nulu area, man, I would definitely encourage checking out places like Feast. It's a nice barbecue spot down there. You got Grind Burger Kitchen, some of the best burgers you'll have. Doc Crow's another great spot that's barbecue downtown by the stadium. There's a ton of things. I would say if you're going to get fried chicken, do the Royals, but if not, I would encourage you to check out Nulu and all the offerings you have there. You'll probably end up at Grind Burger Kitchen.
All right. I will definitely hit one of those spots and I'll send it to you on Twitter and give my review.
Fantastic, man.
Thank you so much for the food recommendation and the football talk. Really appreciate it and hope to speak again soon.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Have a good one, Jacob.
Appreciate it, man.